Hello, it's Amanda here from Suddenly Autistic, and in this video I want to talk about why I keep talking about being autistic. Um, yeah, why? 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 I am definitely one of those people who gets ruminative thoughts and doubts around what they're doing. Often, even as I'm doing something, I'm like, what are you doing? Are you doing the right thing? Is this what you're supposed to be doing? Is there any point to this? And then I'll start thinking, look, why do you keep going on about being autistic? Why do you keep talking about autism? Is it an obsession? What's going on with you? Are you over identifying with it? I have to keep reminding myself, and even making this video, I was sort of reminding myself again and going back again and saying, no, this is important. There's reasons why you're doing this, and there's reasons why you are talking about being autistic, and why you make these videos. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I guess the first thing I want to do is to actually talk about a scenario that happened last week. So I've moved house, I'm in a new place, and I'm meeting new people. And I met a new person last week, and they introduced themselves as being quite the village chatterbox sort of thing, and that's pretty much their own words, and then proceeded to ask me lots of questions about myself and whatever. And there's certain things you don't want to tell new people, or you whatever, you just don't have to tell anyone anything. But then there's other things that you do share, and one of the things I shared was that I'm autistic. It didn't come out first off, it wasn't the first thing, but we were talking for a while backwards and forwards, and I had some time on my hands, and I shared that, because to me, sharing that I'm autistic is not a private thing. It's not like telling somebody that I've got to go to the doctors because I've got a terrible, I don't know, lump under my armpit or something like that. It's not something that's for a select few. It's something that I feel is obvious and that is also invisible, which seems a bit of a weird scenario. But so if I go back in time to any time in the last sort of 46 years or so, I think I've had my diagnosis for just over 2 years now. So during that time, I have been me, and I have been presenting as me in the fullest of my capacities, and I have in many social settings come away from those social settings, either one-off parties, or places like schools, workplaces, or whatever, and thought, there's just something a little bit different about me compared to the masses. I don't really know what it is. I can't really put my finger on it. Sometimes it feels like, I'm going to own it, sometimes it felt like I was better than other people, and that can be a dangerous thing to tell a psychologist, because then you start getting down the track of other type of diagnosis. But there are some strengths, some amazing strengths that come with being autistic, but I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt like there was some capacities, some amazing capacity I had that other people didn't seem to have, or other people were getting tripped up in different things and I wasn't. But then I also felt equally and often more importantly that I was deficient, and different in a negative, not so good way to other people, and that I just, that everybody else, or the majority of other people, seem to have this capacity to get it, to just go with the flow beyond the right page of the book. That's not even a book, it's an invisible manual that they clearly had that I didn't. So I've always felt a little bit out of step. So I didn't tell anybody I was autistic before I knew, because I didn't know. It's an obvious thing. You don't go around telling people. I didn't even go, I think I might be, or I am self-diagnosed, because the diagnostic sort of process for women on the autism spectrum has become much more of a thing. People are talking out about it, about their own diagnosis and process and whatever, only relatively recently. So I'd say going back 5 years, it would have been quite difficult to even self-diagnose, for a woman of my age who's been through that, it wouldn't be the first thing that comes to mind for sure. And in fact, I got my ADHD, which I think the ADHD is the gateway drug for autism for older women. We tend to, instead of now getting the borderline, the depression, the anxiety, the whatever, and that's it, people, medical professionals will look at us for things like ADHD, and then if we pass that test, we might then progress to autism. But going straight out there with the autism diagnosis is still perhaps a little bit of a bitter pill or hard pill to swallow for a lot of late diagnosed women, purely because and I'm talking about people in there maybe even from, I don't know, maybe even their late 20s upwards, but certainly in their 30s and 40s and nearing the 50s, and anyone above that we were not seen in the autism diagnosis. We were literally written out of it in a lot of ways, and so it wasn't even something that the most stereotypical of us women would have seen for ourselves, unless we had extremely high support needs and we were picked up out of necessity at a younger age. There's a phrase, uncanny valley, which is linked to robotics. It originated out of robotics, and if you make machines and robots human-like, people like them more and they interact with them more, up to a point. If you make them too human-like, but they don't quite pass that bar of passing as a human, people would go off them. They don't like them. They find them weirdly I suppose a bit scary, a bit uncanny, a bit, they don't know how to relate to them. Are you human or not? You're a bit sort of out of sync. You're not quite robot, you're not quite human. What are you? I felt like that. So I felt like I was living in some uncanny valley. And I say that now with hindsight, because at the time, before I was diagnosed, I just felt like I was an alien. I just felt like I was not human, which I don't know whether it's better to feel like I suppose I was talking about that, living in an uncanny valley or living in a separate world. Yeah, maybe that's how it feels now. Maybe that is a bit better. But basically, before diagnosis, I felt like I was just a different species to the average human, because every objective measure that I could find, I was like, well, I don't react like that. I don't respond like that. I don't like that. I don't feel that. That doesn't have that same etymology in me. I am not on this program. I just don't tick any of these boxes, and none of this sort of works. And that would even go for things like counselling. When I went to counselling, I'd get very frustrated, usually not in the session because it takes me a while to process things, but I'd come home and I'd think, why did they think when I said that? Why did they then take me down this track? And that doesn't make sense, because that's not at all where I was going. That doesn't resonate with me at all. I'd have a lot of problems getting help or getting to the bottom of what was going on with me. And that's not to say that any therapy I did prior to my diagnosis wasn't useful. I had some very useful sessions, including hypnotherapy, which was great for other problems, but there was always a little something and that I just couldn't get, and the autism explains that. But getting the diagnosis took me from a place of me feeling like I was a different species to feeling like, no, I am not just this. I'm not a different species. I am just a neurodiverse. That doesn't work, does it? I'm just an atypical human. So I am human. I have human experiences, but I'm wired in a different way, and this way is explained by autism. So getting my autistic diagnosis is then I still remain in uncanny valley, and I'm very aware of that. When I met this new person, as I do with any new people, if it's a conversation that goes into any sort of depths of backwards and forwards, it's not like I wouldn't necessarily say it as the very first thing that comes out of my mind, but it is quite pertinent. It's quite front of my mind, and it's something that I do like to get out there fairly early on, because I know I come across as an uncanny valley participant. There is something weird about me that people can't put their finger on. I can pass as a functional woman-shaped person, and that's probably okay and whatever. But as soon as you start interacting with me or observing me for any length of time, especially my body language, maybe the way that I, especially, there's a certain type of man, which this person was, that has quite gendered humor. Maybe it's a bit old fashioned. They have this vision of what women should be or are, and the vision of what men should be or are. And this person was doing that. There was a lot of gendered kind of jokes that a stereotypical woman in that scenario, just meeting someone for the first time, might giggle along or humor them or stroke their ego a little bit. That fell flat on me. Not because I was trying to say, look, that's old fashioned, we don't do that to women these days, stop it with your condescending, weird, stereotypical, jokey things. And I don't want to sound like this person was horrible. This individual isn't horrible. I mean, I'd be friends with them and, talk to them again. They are what they are. They're a product of their thing, and they have a certain way of communicating that is not going to work well with me because I don't follow that script. And that's the thing, you see. I found that in the olden days, that kind of chap, that kind of man, would have probably come away from a conversation with me feeling like, aha, she's playing hard to get. Or if they, maybe that wasn't the zone they were going down, or it's like, oh, she's one of those type of, she's a bit aloof, she doesn't, she's got tickets on herself, or she thinks she's better, or whatever. There'd be something, there'd be a narrative, there'd always be an explanation. I find that telling people, all kinds of people, including those kinds of people, that I'm autistic, whether whether they take it or not is up to them. That's nothing to do with me, but it makes me feel better because it's like, well, you can go away and ponder that, why your strategy of dealing with stereotypical women didn't work with me, and maybe put the fact that I'm autistic in the mix and possibly learn something and have a good time reflecting on that conversation, instead of having it all fall in the negative for me, which is how things used to be. Or either hyper negative, you're not a nice person, you're just not a very nice woman, you're a bit harsh and blah blah, but not very feminine, that could come back at me. Or I'm playing hard to get, in which case then you couldn't get rid of these men. Anyway, this chat, when I said I was autistic, the conversation kind of went on, didn't really say much at all. Well, it did. The person said, you don't seem very autistic. That's the first thing they said. And I think actually what I said to him at that point was, well, you don't seem very normal to me. And I'm laughing because I thought that was funny after saying it, but at the time it just came out of my mouth. I do laugh at my own jokes a lot. I find myself very funny, which sounds ridiculous, but it's true, so I got to own that. And I think I find myself funny because there's a little bit of myself, I'm calling it my brain, but it's just me, that comes out with things faster than my brain mediates them. And it's not necessarily that I wouldn't have said it had I have thought a little bit quicker, but it's funny that it just comes out, and then I'm like, oh, and then I do laugh, and I stand by it. So basically, when he said to me, you don't see, I say I'm autistic, blah blah blah, because it was relevant to whatever the thing was preceding that bit of the conversation. He said, oh, you don't seem very autistic. And then I say, well, you don't seem very normal, and I have a little giggle, and he took offence. He didn't like that, but he came around. He didn't fully come around, I must say. He sort of, I could tell that he was a little bit, his little ego had got a bit of a, a bit of a dent there, because maybe there's a certain type of man out there who still likes to mansplain women to women, and especially the individuals. They like to feel like they know us better than we know ourselves. I'm not saying that this particular chap was like that, but he could have been. I have met men like that before. So this was new information for him, and he didn't quite know how to let that sit. And let me also put it out there that there's no way that this was a chat-up situation. I'm happily married. To me, I was meeting my neighbour. I'd been on a walk with my dog, and I was on my way home. I had some time to kill, and I think think it's fairly nice to know who lives around you, because we do live in a place where there's natural disasters, bushfires, whatever. So it's kind of nice to kind of, understand who's who and what's what and who lives where, so that you can have each other's backs. It's also just a nice thing to do in general. So, there's that. But no, I do not want to have other relationships with any of my neighbours, thank you very much. Just casual acquaintances, and sometimes maybe a little bit better than that, friends is enough. But anyway, the conversation moved and morphed, and then he kept coming back to this autism thing a little bit, and he did concede that I am a little bit more literal than other women he's met, on the evidence that I wasn't laughing at his continual barrage of jokes. I assume that's what it was. I think that is what it was. And I wasn't laughing at them because they weren't hitting me as jokes. They were hitting me as him trying to anecdotes, more like an anecdote that wasn't really true or funny. And I think for that kind of a joke to be funny, you have to share that level, that sort of view of the world, that wiring and that intellect. My husband sometimes finds things funny like that I don't, on account of us having slightly different brain wiring and I suppose intellectual capacities, for want of a better word. And in that, again, I'm not saying better or worse or bigger or smaller or whatever. It's just different, it's just different, and I accept it as that. So sometimes when my husband says something and laughs, or there's something on the TV that he finds really funny, then he'll try to explain it to me, and I'll be like, yeah, I know what they're saying, it's just not funny to me. And as a woman, not laughing when another man finds something funny or makes a joke, it's actually can get you into a bit of trouble, or it has in the past for me. So I'm waffling a little bit now, but this is all kind of relevant, because this is why I tell people I'm autistic. This is all why. Why am I obsessed? I'm not obsessed. Okay, so I'm not every day obsessed with my autism. I don't wake up and say, what am I going to do with my autism today? I just wake up and say, what do I need to do? But every day, my autism brings things to the party. It makes it hard for me to pivot and shift when things shift in life. I know that when I meet new people, they're going to have a view of me. They're going to find me in this uncanny valley. I have always been aware that I come across as a little bit different, but not in an easy way. I am quite subtle in my differences, at least in the beginning. But spend any amount of time with me and you'll be able to tot up things that I do that are a little bit weird, that put me a little bit outside. Now, you might think of me as quirky, interesting, maybe a bit artistic, maybe just very clever, and a little bit, oh, she's just one of those, smart, dumb people type of things. But, those things are okay, and they're not necessarily not true. But there's other things. Some people have thought of me as aloof, a bit of a psycho killer, aggressive, dominating, disinterested, rude. People have said those things to me behind my back, and I say that because I know I'm not an idiot. I do have a reasonable amount of social capacity. Being autistic doesn't mean I'm oblivious to the body language of others. It just means that I don't have that mirroring effect that others do. I don't feel like I don't necessarily process it in real time. So I will notice the tone of the room. I will notice people's body language and shifts and turns and whatever. I won't necessarily understand all of it. I'll have to go home and process it and think about things and to go do a deep dive, a bit of research maybe, and get to know that person, gather some evidence on how they normally behave, and then you work it out from there. So for me, it's a process. But I do gather that evidence about people. So I am noticing body language. So I know sometimes I've been in rooms and people are talking about me behind my back. They're even talking about me to my face in their heads, saying things about me to them. I can see it, but what I can't necessarily do is correct it in the moment, and you can't make people think differently about yourself. So you really can't. No matter what evidence you give them, people will and do make up their own opinions about you. And indeed, this new neighbour guy was definitely making up an opinion that my autism diagnosis wasn't true, even though he'd only just met me and had absolutely no reason to disbelieve me. And why the heck would I go around telling random strangers, or even people in the village that are going to potentially be my neighbours for a long time, that I've got something that, like autism, when I don't? I mean, what is the gain for anyone there? That's just weird. But anyway, that happens. So all of this is culminating in answering the question of, why do I seem to be obsessed? Why do I talk about autism? Why would I bring it up with people? Why do I mention it anyway? Well, I mention it because if I don't fill that gap, if I don't offer something up, it's not that I've not given them anything. I have given them me, the presentation of me, and people will fill in that gap. And they have, and they often do it ungenerously and towards the negative. Occasionally towards the positive, but sometimes it's not necessarily been a positive for me if they've wanted to pursue me, thinking that I'm more interested in just playing games with them, for example. So I find, as someone who's autistic, that clear, concise, direct communication is often the best, as long as it's done with generosity and that spirit of friendship and inquiry. So an inquisition, not an inquisition, an inquiry into how someone is. You want to learn more about them. You want to be generous. You want to understand them. So for me, I'm proud of the fact that I'm autistic and I've made it this far and I'm not dead yet. It's not easy. It's not easy staying alive. It's not easy it's just not easy. Life is not easy. Getting my autism diagnosis at a later age means a lot of water's gone under the bridge. I've got a lot of evidence of how people have treated me in the past in different scenarios, and I'm still traumatized by that. I can't lie, I am. I still have quite a lot of trauma about how people have misunderstood me. I can't do anything about other people, like I said. Even no amount of words that I tell them, no amount of paperwork and evidence that comes with me will change the mind of someone who doesn't want to see what's right in front of them. But it does change me. It makes me feel, speaking my truth, I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to do this and to be this person. And to share that with other people, because for every person now that says, oh, you don't look it, you don't feel it, I don't think you are, I think that's just, oh, everyone's a little bit, or whatever they're using to invalidate you, that's on them, not me. It's on them. And if people continue to do that to me, then they're not in my circle. I am forgiving and generous and accepting that it takes time, because I take time to learn new things and to change my perceptions. So I will give people, everybody, a bit of another chance. I'm also that's my nature, but I won't give infinite chance. There'll come a point where, after several conversations or interactions with people who refuse to believe that I know myself better than they know me, they're out of my life. And that is sad and also necessary, because I know me better than anyone else knows me. That's because there's so much more to me than just what anyone else sees. And indeed, there's so much more to anyone. So if you've ever met somebody who's autistic and wondered, like, especially late diagnosed, because we live so long and have so much trauma in our cupboards, I guess, and you're wondering, well, why do they keep talking about it now? Well, you could always ask them, what does it mean to them? Before judging, that would be nice. Or you could just accept that it's a really important thing for them. I accept that this is important for me now to share this and to talk about this. Come 5 years' time, I might not want to talk about it at all. I might be talking about it more. I don't know, and it doesn't matter, because this is where I'm at now. This is what works for me now, and this is what I'll do now. And I do face a little bit of opposition and a little bit of discomfort from people that I know, people who are close to me, people who are far away. But I also experience a lot of validation, support, and group hugginess, which I'm not that comfortable with, but it's kind of nice, around people who are very supportive of what I'm doing and how I advocate for myself. So You've got to take that because that is life. You know, I'm happy with what I'm doing, and that's really all that matters. Even if it's hard sometimes to be out there, out and proud, and have other people knock it or discredit it, at least trying to. But, you know, it is what it is, as they say. But yes, I've not become obsessed with being autistic. It isn't a special subject of mine. It's part of my everyday reality. I can't outrun it. It is who I am, and I will be continuing to introduce myself with autism as part of my story when I meet people, because I've lived in that uncanny valley for too long without knowing about myself and without being able to sort of correct the narrative or at least put another bit of evidence out there. Now I can, I will, but I can't guarantee that people will take that up. If they want to stick me in that, oh, she's a bit weird box, they can, because yeah, I am a bit weird, and it's not all because of my autism, but a lot of it is.